How did I do that? Yeah. Oh. Yes. Audrey Jones of Sussex IFCA.
So I'm aware I am the last talk before lunch, so I will try not to overrun. So I've been asked to go right down to the local area and talk about developing management at Kingmere Marine Conservation Zone. So my name is Audrey Jones. I'm the Conservation Manager at Sussex IFCA, but I'm currently on a year's secondment from Natural England. And I was closely involved with developing management at Kingmere while at Natural England. So I'm going to give you an introduction to the Marine Conservation Zone, talk about how we develop the evidence base to overcome knowledge gaps, talk about how the community input helped to shape the final management, give you an overview of the timeline of the process, and talk about the next steps. So Kingmere is located off the West Sussex coast, wholly in the Sussex IFCA district. It's located between 5 to 10 kilometres off the coast between Littlehampton and Worthing. And it was designated after the Balanced Seas regional project, and it had wide support across all sectors. So it was designated for 3 features: subtidal chalk, which is the green dots up in the right-hand corner, infralittoral rock and thin mixed sediments, which is the pink area, and then spawning and nesting black sea bream. So to put that into context, there are basically 2 areas of distinct reef within the site, one being Kingmere Reef, which is the black outline in the middle, and the other bit being around the subtidal chalk. There are also, the rest of the site is kind of a combination of boulders and sediment. It's not a uniform site in any way. And also we've got the charismatic nesting and spawning black sea bream. So just give you a very brief overview of the marine life. Based on the upper and in the shallower depths, on the upper surfaces, we've got predominantly red seaweed, and as you get deeper, you get to the anemones and encrusting sponges. You've also got crabs and lobsters. It's got several species that spawn there, not least the black sea bream. So just give you an overview of the black sea bream. It was the first site in the country when it was designated to have black sea bream as a feature. And it's probably because it's one of the best studies in the country, because there are 2 aggregate licences just to the south of the site, which as part of their conditions they had to undertake monitoring of the black sea bream nests. And since it was designated, there's another licence which actually extracts aggregate from within the site. So bream start to arrive in Sussex typically in March, where they start to form spawning aggregations, and they usually spawn between April and June. So larger male fish will start to look for suitable areas to create a nest, and what they're looking for is thin layer of sediment over underlying bedrock, and they use their tail to excavate a sort of small area where the female can come and lay their eggs. So you can see that in pictures 1, which is from drop-down video, and the thing to the right in the middle is not the moon. That is showing how bream nests show up on side-scan sonar. So the male needs to excavate nests in order to attract the female. So in number 2, you can see that the male is the larger, black, darker fish, and the female is the smaller, lighter fish. So he attracts the female then lays her eggs, which can be seen in number 3. And then the male then stays to guard that nest from predators. And you can see a male chasing off a wrasse there. So while the male is on the nest, he is vulnerable to fishing pressures, and the nest is also vulnerable to being towed away or damaged from other activities, including fishing. So the site, all 3 features, had a general management approach of recover, which meant that Sussex IFCA needed to look at management and decide if any management needed to be undertaken and what that might look like. The main fishing activity for bream at the site is pair trawling, as well as recreational sea angling, but potting and netting does also occur. So we had two conservation objectives for the site, one around protected habitats, and the key thing is that the extent should be stable or increasing, and there's also a biological element to it, which is basically that it should not deteriorate from its structure and function, and also its biological composition. The black sea bream has its own conservation objective, first bit being around actually protecting its underlying habitats that it needs to actually nest and spawn, but also the key thing here is that the population must be free of the disturbance of a kind likely to significantly affect the survival of its members. So before we could actually start to look at management, we needed to address some key evidence gaps. One of those was around the habitats, and that was undertaken with a partnership project with CFAS and the Environment Agency under the wider DEFRA verification project. So Sussex IFCA focused on the bream, and key things we needed to know was the location and extent of nests, the temporal and spatial spawning site fidelity exhibited by the bream. So did the same individuals return to spawn at the site each year? We also needed to understand the potential extent of bream movements during the year. Where did the fish go once they left Kingmere? We wanted to have a better understanding of the survivability of bream post-catch and release angling. And we also wanted to get a better handle on the fisheries that may impact upon the bream spawning associated with the Kingmere. And we also wanted to bring in the community, as Peter touched on, to understand their support for the site and any proposed future management. So in 2014 and 2015, Sussex IFCA undertook side-scan sonar surveys and drop-down video. And this just gives you an overview. Again, you can see those bream nests, those pot marks on that side-scan sonar, and what the bream looked like underwater. And this was successful surveys, and the results helped to shape our management. We also undertook tagging studies. We undertook 2 different types. We've got Alice. You're definitely starring today in that picture. So we undertook 2 different types. We undertook acoustic tagging as well as identification tagging. So the acoustic tagging we undertook in partnership with CFAS, and 5 large, healthy, mature bream were caught, tagged and released. And each tag was set to emit a unique frequency for a month, then go dormant for 11 months, and then transmit again for a month again a year later. So in 2014, 6 acoustic searches were conducted within the month, and then a further 3 in 2015. And hydrophones were deployed from a vessel in order to try and tag or track the sound. So this shows that, sorry to get my colours. So in 2014, 4 of the tags were reheard, which is on the red, blue, orange and pink. And in 2015, which is the yellow one of the 5 tags was reheard. So unfortunately, the conclusion from the acoustic tag pilot study is that actually mobile hydrophones deployed from a vessel wasn't the right way to actually sort of monitor the acoustic tags at Kingmere. This was partly due to the topography, the reefs confusing how the sound was heard, and also the inability to actually determine whether the tag was coming from a live or dead fish. So therefore, no further acoustic tagging was undertaken by the IFCA. The best way to do it would have had a fixed array on the seabed, but that's extremely costly, extremely resource intensive, and also there's a danger of the gear being damaged from weather and also fishing activities. So next was the identification tagging. A pilot study was undertaken initially, which was deemed to be successful, so it was then rolled out into subsequent years of 2015 and 2016. And we worked with local charter angling boats and their customers in order to actually deploy the tags into the fish. So overall, 2,397 individual fish were successfully tagged over the 3 years. And from that, we only had 85 recapture events reported to the IFCA. So these were actually tagged, still attached to fish. They were recaptured by a variety of methods, including recreational and commercial. And this only gave a total recapture reporting rate of 3.5% over the 3 years. Fortunately, the Sussex IFCA were made aware of many other instances of tagged fish being caught, but they weren't reported to us. So the diagram shows where the fish were recaptured. So 2014 recaptures are in red, 2015 in blue, and 2016 in yellow. So in 2015, bream that were tagged over the site in 2014 were recaptured again in 2015 during the bream breeding season. And in 2016, fish that were tagged in 2014 and 2015 breeding season were recaptured over Kingmere during the 2016 breeding season. So results from the identification tagging, that we had an increased understanding of the survivability of adult black sea bream post-catch and release angling. We had an improved understanding of black sea bream movements in and outside of Kingmere MCZ during and outside of the spawning season. There appears to be a strong level of site fidelity of spawning black bream at Kingmere. We also had an improved relationship with charter vessel owners, particularly at Littlehampton. And key, the information we gained through the study helped us to shape our management. So Sussex IFCA, like all the other IFCAs, also undertakes monitoring of the fishing activity in their sites, because we don't have IVMS at the moment. So this shows the fishing activity pre-management from 2001 to 2014, just showing the amount of activity. The top left-hand one is potting, we've got netting, trawling, and then angling. So the key fishery over the site is potting, and then followed by trawling, and then recreational angling is extremely popular over the site throughout the year, but particularly during the bream breeding season, which is April to June. And it attracts anglers from all over the country, not just local anglers. So we also wanted to bring the community with us. So using the community voice method, as Peter touched on, we engaged the communities on the wider management of the MCZs in Sussex. And the intention was to inform the IFCA's decision-making on management of the sites. And these workshops help Sussex IFCA work closely with the community in developing our management for Kingmere MCZ. So, we pulled all that information together and came up with this very pretty map, which shows what the management is. So this came into force in 2016, December 2016, in time for the 2017 bream breeding season. So we divided the site into 4 zones, and we divided it into 2 distinct seasons. The bream breeding season, which is the 1st of April to the 30th of June, and the outside bream breeding season being the rest of the year. So on this map here, the top right-hand zone, the yellow zone, is called Zone 1, and no fishing is allowed in there during the bream breeding season. Zone 2, the green one below it, angling is allowed in there during the bream breeding season, but there's a bag limit of 4 fish per person per day. And in Zones 3 and 4, which is the blue and the purple area, there's no towed gear or nets during the bream breeding season, but other activities can occur. But again, there's that bag limit for anglers. And then outside the bream breeding season, in zones 1, 2 and 4, so the yellow, green and blue, all activities can happen except trawling. And in zone 3, the purple bit, all activities can occur. But there's throughout the year a bag limit on anglers of 4 fish per day. So the IFCA felt that this allowed recreational anglers to still access part of the site during the bream breeding season, but it also helped to achieve the conservation objectives as set out by Natural England. And so far, the compliance with the bylaw has been good. So an overview of the timeline, just to give you, it doesn't happen overnight, I think, as other IFCAs have touched on. So the site was designated in November 2013, and then we had a series of monitoring and community engagement, which led to the committee in April 2015 agreeing that formal consultation could start on the proposed management, which meant that the bylaw was sent off to DEFRA in November 2015, and it was finally signed off in December 2016. And then ever since then, we've been doing ongoing research and management over the site. And then within our bylaw, there's a 4-year review clause, which means that it needs to be reviewed again at the end of this year, early next year. So our next steps are to continue to assess the effectiveness of the management, and then to review the bylaw at the end of this year, early next year. And the key thing we're waiting for is Natural England's updated conservation advice. So since our site was designated in November 2013, in the last tranche there were 3 more sites proposed in Dorset for black sea bream. And Natural England is due to issue their advice, I think, on those sites at the end of this month. And it may mean that we need to update our management in Kingmere. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions for Audrey of Sussex IFCA.
Sussex. I can move, it's fine.
Yep, thank you, go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much, Audrey. Declan Tobin from JNCC. Just a very quick question, picking up on your last point. You focused obviously, and it linked nicely with the previous presentation, on the community voice method. But just looking forward, you mentioned the review, and I just wonder what happens next. So assuming you have new evidence to inform changes in management decision, how do you get community buy-in at that point? Or does the community voice method only pertain to the designation or the first stage in setting management?
We haven't formally decided how we are actually going to undertake the review yet, but I guess if significant changes are needed, then we would have to go back out and reconsult, would be my guess. But Tim might have more. I don't want to speak over Tim, who's the chief.
Sorry, Tim Dappling, Chief Officer for Sussex IFCA. Yeah, it's a very good question. I think obviously we need to know what the conservation advice is going to be going forward on the review. I mean, that's a key part. At the moment, the management has been developed. You know, all that work that's gone in to find appropriate management that was also acceptable to the community and from a conservation point of view, we would be very careful about, you know, risking that, because the relationship with the recreational sector was particularly important in Littlehampton. And one of the positive things, which perhaps wasn't really, Audrey didn't have time to explain, was the fact that when we did the tagging work, particularly, what we found was that a lot of the charter skippers and the crews they were, or the customers they were taking out, how receptive they were to, if you like, giving up fish that were going to be tagged, and that it actually, once they understood what was going on, many of them actually said, well, you know, I was going to take a fish, but I won't. I'll put all my fish back. And so they were sort of changing their behaviours to that. Obviously, there were some people who wanted to take all their fish, and in which case the skippers were saying, well, we can't take you to the conservation zone, you'll have to fish somewhere else. So it was quite interesting to see how that adapted, and so there's opportunities there to think in terms of any changes to the conservation advice, which we might be able to, you know, move within that and still accommodate the stakeholders or the angling community's needs.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. Well,